10:53:89, and as we come towards 11 o'clock tonight, I shall welcome David Icke to the show. Good evening, David.
Hi, James. How you doing, mate?
I'm very well. I'm sorry your car wouldn't start.
Yeah, is there a mechanic in the house, mate? That's the question, you know.
I mean, I've got... Peter's just walked in who does my phones on the programme. I said, where have you been? We've been on nearly three-quarters. He said, I was stuck on a train in Kent.
Oh, well, it's one of those nights, and it's bloody perishing down here. I tell you what, if I was stuck outside my house tonight, I wouldn't bloody start either.
I don't think anybody should go out. David, this book, it says after the title, "And the Truth Shall Set You Free," the most explosive book of the 20th century, which I have read with something. I haven't finished it, I have to tell you. It is a huge volume of lots of words in here.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to write?
Well, I mean, it probably took me about 9 months, but a series of absolutely extraordinary coincidences happened, which put me in the right place at the right time. And I've basically gathered information from all over the world. It's not just my research, some of it is, but I've gathered information from all over the world. And what I found most compelling, James, really, is that people who would agree on nothing else, like in America, you've got the Christian patriots whose mindset I couldn't be further from. In other parts of the world, you've got the Islamic researchers, you've got just researchers of all different backgrounds and different creeds and different beliefs, but they're all coming to the same conclusion on what's going on in the world, what the game plan is, centralization of power on a global level, world army, World Central Bank, microchip population, which is ridiculously close, amazing as it may seem, world government and such like, and the organizations and many of the people who are involved in that manipulation. And it's being manipulated not with tanks in the streets because there's too many people, just by manipulating public opinion.
So basically the book says, and as I said, the most explosive book, you say, of the 20th century, the book is actually trying to warn people that there is an underlying band of interest to take over the planet, to be a one world, one army, one whatever.
Yeah, and basically it's mass mind control, really, and it's being done in very subtle, but when you realize what's going on, not terribly subtle ways, actually.
Are all governments involved?
Well, the way it works, and the only way it could work, is that most of the people who are involved in every day working towards centralizing control in the world and centralizing power don't realize they're doing it, or don't realize the implications of it. If you take any organization today, whether it's a secret society, a government, talk radio for that matter, any organization, they're all structured as a pyramid. At the peak of the pyramid, you've got a tiny, tiny few people who know everything there is to know about that organization, that know its real agenda, where it's really going. You come down from that peak, and suddenly in any organization, you're meeting more and more and more people who know less and less and less and less about what the organization's really about. They only know their part in it. I was talking to somebody who worked, while I was researching the book, who worked for 20 years at GCHQ, the listening station in Cheltenham. And he said that building is actually structured in this way, this process known as compartmentalization, keeping from everyone within the pyramid, apart from those at the top, what everyone else is doing and how it fits together.
So, if for a moment we go with your theory, and I accept your theory, what is the reason behind all this? I mean, what is the point? Why is it being done?
Well, in the end, it's the same. I suppose the answer to that question is the same as the answer to the question of why do multinational companies who own thousands of other companies, and at the top they have more money than they could spend in 100 lifetimes, go on accumulating more and more money, more and more companies, because in the end, money is not about wealth at that level, because it's like cuckoo land. It's about power, and power is a disease, as someone once said. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And we're in a situation where we've got diseased minds, actually, at the top here. Basically, it's a fascist mentality. And the idea is to centralize control of the world to the point where nation-states are just basically principalities. I mean, we're beginning to see that stepping stone via the European community. And it would be policed by a world army. And interestingly, that's what we're seeing in Bosnia. In my last book, The Robots' Rebellion, I said that what part of the game plan was to engineer events in the world which would lead to the creation more and more of a multinational force that would eventually fuse into a world army.
Okay.
And what we're getting in Bosnia now, as a result of this horrific conflict over these years, is the biggest multinational force since the Second World War actually going in there to administer peace. And of course they're not administering peace, they're administering the absence of war, which is not actually the same thing.
Well, okay, David, how have you come to this stage in your life? How has this gone on from when you came out and you say you were misquoted by a lot of the media, and
just a little bit.
Well, and you had taken one tack. You became very religious. You said, you know, you were coming to spread the word and everything else, and you seem to have moved quite a lot from those days.
Well, let's get one thing, James, straight. I did not discover religion. In my various books over the years, I've described religion from anything from the greatest form of mind control yet invented to, at its most extreme, psychological fascism, which it has been and still is in some areas. But I tell you how this whole thing started. In the early 90s, I went through a transformation myself when if you like, the mask we put to the world, that is not the real us, it's the mask we say this is acceptable to the world so I don't get a lot of hassle for being different. That kind of began to break and fall away, and the real me started to come through. And as a result of what was said about me and stuff in the early 1990s, you know, I couldn't walk down any street, literally, in this country without being laughed at by most of the people. You know, I'd get in the car and think, well, sod this, I'm going to get away and have a rest from all this stuff. Yeah. And I'd stop at the lights and I'd look across, and the people in the next car would be laughing at me. Now, two things happened to me at that time, which led me on the road to where I've actually moved on to.
So when people were saying that you were the Son of God and this sort of thing, I mean, did you believe that? At that time, were you actually, in as far as your mind was concerned, you believed that that's what was going on?
Now, what I was saying was, and the great problem is that if you talk about things that are slightly different to the status quo, you still get pigeonholed in the status quo. Sure. So if you're talking about spirituality, we must be into religion then, mate. And there's still people when I walk down the street who say, praise the Lord, David. You know, and I couldn't be further away from all that stuff.
But a lot of people actually wanted to believe that, and a lot of people did turn their minds around to believe it.
What I was saying at the time was that, and indeed, open-minded physics and open-minded science, as it moves on and opens its mind more and more, is confirming many of these things. That creation is actually one gigantic energy field, which is manifesting itself in endless different ways. Everything is energy. What we call matter, the physical world we live in, is actually energy that's slowed to a very slow vibration, but the energy is everything. It's in different forms. And what I was saying was, we're all part of that same energy field, that same consciousness. We're all part of the same gigantic mind. We're like droplets of water in an ocean of consciousness. We're individual to an extent because we're the sum total of all our experiences. But together, all the droplets make up the whole. So actually, the same energy field that is us is the same energy field that is the trees and the air and the grass and the rain. They're just different forms. Right. It's like water, clouds, and ice are different versions of the same substance, same basic principle. Yeah. So just to finish the point, I was saying that if you want to use symbolic language, then we're all sons and daughters of God. We're all aspects of the same whole. But of course, this was misinterpreted or interpreted to mean he thinks he's Jesus, you know. I wish I was, you know, because I've just moved to Wiltshire. I lived on the Isle of Wight for a long time, and being the Messiah, I mean, you know, would have saved me a hell of a lot of money in ferry fares, but unfortunately I have to use the car ferry like everybody else.
Do you not think that maybe you should have objected to it a little more strongly, or did you find it difficult to get the media to help you object to this?
James, you know the media as well as anyone else. Once it starts to roll with a story, with a mindset, it's a bloody monster. You can't turn it round. So and it's almost like having wet paint on your hands, because everything it touches, it affects. So there's people all across the media. I go around the radio stations and stuff, and their immediate reaction is either, you know, he's bloody mad, him, and he thinks he's God, he thinks he's Jesus.
Are you still aware that people might have this thought about you?
Yeah, but I tell you what, the other thing that kind of happened, two things happened at that time. First of all, I realized how easy it is to get vast numbers of people to think anything, because they were laughing at me, not for what I was saying, but for what people were being told that I was saying and standing for. So I started on this track of, hold on a minute, if people can take on that view of me like that on a mass scale, what the hell else are we all taking on as our reality that's an equal load of nonsense? And the other thing that happened, that of course led me into where I am now, but the other thing that happened at that time is that I let go of the prison that so many people in this world, the vast majority, live in, and that is the fear of what other people think of us. Most people in the world are not doing, saying, and expressing what they really feel and they really want to do in their lives, because they're in this prison of, oh my God, what will the blokes at work think? What will the blokes down the pub think? Oh my God, what about the neighbours? And I walked out, as a result of the ridicule, I thought, well, sorry, I mean, they're all laughing anyway, so why should I worry what they think? And I walked out of prison, and now when people ask me a question or whatever, I open my mouth and I say what I think. I don't expect everyone to agree with it. I'd be a very boring world if they did, but at least it's what I think and not what I want them to think I think, so they think I'm an all right person. Because I'm an all right person, and I know that now. I don't have to have any confirmation of that from outside, from anyone else.
If we take the sort of conspiracy theory one step further, and some people may say, okay, David, perhaps the conspiracy theory is there, and perhaps there's somebody guiding you in this way that maybe you're not even aware of, and using you in the way that you are saying in the book. We are all being used.
Well, if they're thinking that, then good on them, because it means they're in control of their own mind, and they're not taking any old rubbish from anyone without filtering it. But I'm not actually being guided by anyone. I kind of work alone, and I just follow my intuition, literally.
Will you take some of our callers'
I'll
questions?
Talk to anybody, me, James. You know that.
Okay. Well, hang on just a moment. We're going to take a short 2-minute break for the news. We'll come straight back with you after that. Okay,
mate.
Thanks very much. Malcolm, if you don't mind, first of all, who's in Essex? Malcolm, you're on.
Hello, Dave.
Hello, Mal.
Hello, mate.
All right, mate.
Yeah, I'm a great supporter of your.
Oh God, I've got one.
I've got all your books at home. But what I wanted to ask you, Dave, is did you go recently to America to promote your latest book?
No, I didn't. No, I'm going in '96.
All right. Well, are you frightened? I mean, after people you've exposed in the book, are you frightened about any threats made to you?
No.
Does it worry you at all?
No, it doesn't, actually, because I tell you what, I've kind of let go as much as I possibly can, anyone possibly can anyway, and that's fear. So much information doesn't get into the public arena because people fear the consequences, and I thought it was about time, because given that I feel that our consciousness, not our body, but our consciousness is eternal, on an eternal journey of evolution, death doesn't frighten me for a start, not at all, not in the least. So I thought it was about time that a book was written and someone stood up and started saying things without editing what they'd found or what they thought, because they feared the consequences. And people keep coming up to me saying, oh, God, you look under your car in the morning, you know.
Yeah.
And I keep saying to them, hey, Dad, I don't have to look under my car because it never starts, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I was going to say
that. I came across a book recently, interestingly, which was written 23 years ago, called None Dare Call It Conspiracy, written by a guy in America called Gary Allen, along the similar lines, similar stuff. And he said something very interesting. He said, when you get close to the truth, he said, they either assassinate you, or if you're high profile and assassinating you would just give credence to what you're saying, they assassinate your character. And that's what's kind of been happening to me over the years. First of all, I was kind of mad, apparently, and now increasingly I'm being portrayed as bad. I've had a public meeting I was going to do in Brighton this week, cancelled because of pressure on the Brighton University because of a kind of smear campaign against me about being kind of neo-Nazi. I mean, crikey, if anyone knows me, they couldn't be further from the truth.
Well,
but it's all about...
Funnily enough, there is a chapter in your book, David, as you know. Thank you for that, Malcolm. The master race. I'm two minds whether or not to bring it up. Because
bring it up, I don't mind.
I've read it this evening. I particularly reread it this evening and found it difficult to come to terms with. But you basically say that although you agree that certain things happened during the Holocaust, you don't appalling things, and you don't diminish that at all.
No,
in fact, you say somewhere, of course, I more than anyone else was disgusted by what happened, and nobody should take it lightly.
Quite right.
But you say you think that people now, when people want to sort of investigate it more and say, well, maybe some of the things didn't happen during the Holocaust, I don't actually see where you want to go, because, you know, atrocities did happen. Terrible atrocities. Atrocities, and you quite rightly say in the book, the atrocities of the white man against the Native American. You could say the white man against the Native Australian, the Native New Zealander as well. There have been terrible atrocities all through our history.
Let me tell you where I'm coming from, James. I feel myself that the appalling things that were done to Jews in Germany, that were done to Gypsies in Germany, Poles in Germany, in other words, the appalling suffering that they went through, is actually being used by some of those who didn't suffer in Nazi Germany to today stop legitimate investigation into their activities. And interestingly, that book I was just quoting, what it went on to say was, if they're assassinating your character, this is 23 years ago, because you're getting too close to the truth, the way they do it is to dub you anti-Jewish and a neo-Nazi. 23 years later, some of this rubbish is being thrown at me, so I must be getting close to the truth. When you think that this book, And the Truth Shall Set You Free, is self-published because of its explosive nature, and the horizon was full of disappearing backsides from publishers when they read the manuscript, it's actually only been made possible by funding from a Jewish man, one of my most valued friends. I think the way the Jewish race have been treated over the years, and the way they were treated in Germany and other places, is absolutely disgraceful. But what I think is equally disgraceful, and it's about time we started having a debate about this, is the way the suffering of Jewish people is being used by those who didn't suffer to stop legitimate investigation into their activities. I find that the ultimate scandal and the ultimate inhumanity, and I feel that it's about time this was challenged.
Okay, I want to take a few more calls, people ringing in their droves. Robin is in London. Robin, you're on Talk Radio to David Icke.
Hello, James and David. World government. Now, you never mention the word federation. Do you know that there's been a movement for world federal government in existence since 1947, and it is a small, open, legitimate movement. There's no conspiracy whatsoever. And the funniest thing is that your suggestion that there's a conspiracy is not borne out by the amount of progress towards what is a legitimate aim in the world, that is, of abolishing international anarchy, which allows war.
Well, it depends where you're coming from and what kind of areas you researched into.
As a former New Zealander who's now a British, I heard as a schoolchild even about the anti-Semitism, the protocols of Zion, the sort of conspiracy that suggested that Kremlin and Vatican and the Jews were in cahoots to dominate the world secretly. And it's so much rubbish and nonsense that even in the European Union setting, the politicians do not spell out what federation is, but that doesn't in any way mean to say there's a conspiracy.
Okay, Robert, let's hear David's answer to that, because he didn't get a chance to answer that. David?
Well,
you're aware of this organisation, presumably.
Well, I've heard of the World Federation, but
a lot of people may think...
World Federalists.
A lot of people may think, David, that world government wouldn't be a bad thing.
Well, it depends what you mean by world government, you see. I have no...
Federation.
Yeah, hold on a second. I could well finish a sentence here if we stay here all night.
Yes, but not world government, world federal government, federation. Get that clear.
No, I'm telling you what I think. You have every right to say what you think, my friend, but you don't have every right to tell me how I'm going to answer your point. I have that right, and I'm going to take it.
Misleading as you may be.
Well, here we go. Oh, crikey. James, are we going to be here all night? Or
Robin, please. Now, let David answer this.
It depends what areas you're looking into. The gentleman talks about all the wars in the world. Well, who the hell is starting them? And
anarchy.
Who the hell is funding them?
Anarchy.
Oh, God.
Well, anarchy seems a good point, actually, David. Are anarchists behind all the wars in the world?
Well, no, the people behind most of the wars are those who fund all sides at the same time, and then keep the war going by continuing to fund them. You know, people can't fight wars indefinitely, James, with an empty bank account. They have to be funded. And if you read my book, and not just my book, but endless other books that have been published throughout this century, and increasing in their number, it's the evidence that the same people funded all sides in the First World War, funded Hitler to power, funded Stalin, funded the Allies, is kind of overwhelming. Many of them Wall Street, based on Wall Street. And why did they do it? For this reason. If you want to centralize power in the world more and more, you need to destroy the status quo. And one of the great mind-controlling techniques that is used on the public opinion day after day is something called problem, reaction, solution. You create a problem in the world. It might be a war in an extreme. It might be a run on a currency. It might be a government collapse, whatever. But you make sure that no one knows who's really behind it. Someone else gets the blame. You then wind up public opinion in relation to that problem, where public opinion utters the classic words, something must be done, something must be done. And then the people who've covertly created the problem wound up that public reaction, then openly offer the solution to the problem they've created, which just happens to be what they intended all along. In that way, not only do you avoid opposition to what you want, you actually get the public to demand that you do it.
This is so, David, this is such a difficult problem and so diverse in its...
So different, sure.
So different.
Thank God for that.
Is anybody ever going to be able to come to grasp what is actually going on?
More and more are. I mean, I've been kind of very, very encouraged by the number of people in this country from all different kinds of backgrounds who are beginning to suss what's going on, because what seems to be a crazy world takes on a lot more sense when you actually come from this perspective. For instance, one of the ways that we are diverted is to believe that people like bureaucrats in Europe are incompetent. That's a diversion. Yeah. We look at the butter mountains and the wine lakes and the overproduction, and we say, oh, it's those bureaucrats, absolute incompetence. But then you say to yourself, hold on a minute, who benefits and who has benefited from all that? Mm. It has destroyed the small farmer.
Who has benefited, by the way?
The multinational companies who now virtually own the food chain from field to plate.
Let's go take a couple more callers. David is in London. David, you're on to David Icke.
Hi, David.
Hi, Dave.
Hi. I've been reading your books for a long time. I'm a researcher of different new religions, and I noticed that
what are you doing with my books, then?
When people criticize you, you label them as robots. Yeah, I think that maybe you're a robot yourself. You claim to be a free thinker, but you've channeled messages and you've followed them to the letter. And I refer to your autobiography where you channeled a spirit, and that spirit told you to have sex with a woman who wasn't your wife, and you made her pregnant. She has a baby now, and you followed that message. And I'm wondering, who's the robot, David?
Well, we all follow what we think is right in this world. You follow what you think is right, and I follow what I think is right. Now, if I respect your right to follow your heart without dictating to you what you should and should not do, and you give me that same respect, then in that sense we have harmony. We don't have agreement, but we have harmony. When you start telling me how I should live my life, and I start telling you how you should live yours, then we have disharmony, which is what we have in the world. So I'll live my life as I see fit, and I won't tell anyone else how to live theirs. You give me that same respect, and we'll have a harmonious world, my friend. You start telling me how to live my life, and me telling you how to live yours, and we won't, which is the one we have at the moment.
But, sorry, hang on, just David, one question I must ask. But isn't the point of your book and your other books to tell people how you think they should be living their lives and how they should be setting their minds?
No, it's not. No, the whole theme of the books is this. If you allow yourself to be dictated to on what you think and what you say and how you live your life by fear of being different, then you occupy what I call the hassle-free zone. You occupy that area of very narrow thought and behavior that is acceptable to society. You don't express who you really are. You put a mask to the world of what you think is acceptable to everyone else. Anyone who steps out of that hassle-free zone, in other words, expresses their uniqueness, which is what we all are.
But I think that
hold on a second.
You follow the message from outside of yourself.
Is immediately jumped upon and ridiculed or condemned. The fear of both keeps people under control. Now, what I'm saying to people is you are unique. Be who you are, express yourself as you are, and not what anyone else tells you to be, including me and this other gentleman on the phone now.
Right, hang on, David. David in London, yes, come back and answer that.
I say that David received a message from a disincarnate spirit which told him to go and impregnate another woman who was a channeler who conveniently channeled the same message from a disincarnate spirit, and David followed that message slavishly. I suggest that he's the robot and not his critics, and I suggest that this cannot have been David's own idea, because he admits that the message said that it would be genetically necessary for him to couple with Mary, and he also made the same claims that Jesus Christ also had a wife and also had a mistress and also had sex with both of them,
David,
and children with both of them.
Hang on, David.
Which is very convenient.
For David Icke, David, do you still believe this or not? Is this still something that you...
Look, I mean, this gentleman, I mean...
well, he's a caller. I don't know who he is.
Yes, and he's a right to his opinion. He's expressed it twice now.
Yeah, but he asked you to... I mean, do you still believe what you wrote in the book then and what was reported heavily in the newspapers?
What I believe is that we are on a journey of evolution. We are a journey of experience. What those experiences are what we need to experience to evolve and to learn. What has happened to me in the last 5 years has shown me so much more about myself and the world than anything that had happened in the previous, 35.
You don't regret...
Of course I don't. I don't regret a thing. Life's about experience, learning from experience and moving on.
Do you think there is some... Right, David, do you think...
condemning everybody else for the way they live their lives. I think that's an arrogance beyond belief. It is that arrogance, actually, that forces people into the hassle-free zone of conforming to what society says they should be. People who would become a herd.
People who agree with you, David, do you... And people who are drawn towards you, can you see a time... I mean, I know that a number of people live in a sort of commune situation with you now. Could you... Do they or not? I mean, I don't know. Oh, right, but this is stories we've heard. That
of course it is. Crikey, I mean, you can get people to believe any damn thing.
So if somebody came on and wrote to you or whatever and they wanted to find out more, do you invite them to come down to sort of go through your readings with them?
No, I don't.
I'm just asking.
Oh, God.
Fine. Okay, I'm asking the question.
I'm going to wake up in a minute.
I'm asking the question.
I'm a guy who lives at home, what you might call a normal life. In my head, however, I challenge the status quo of imposed thought, and I go out and do it. And what I say to people is giving your mind away to anything is giving your power away. I don't care whether it's a priest. I don't care whether it's a political ism. I don't care whether it's a political party. I don't care whether it's a New Age guru. Giving your bloody mind away is what has created this herd mentality that we have today.
So you
more and more
don't
people,
want...
however, are taking their minds back.
So if people agree with you, if people like what you say, you don't actually want them to start worshipping you in any way, following you, or seeing you as a leader.
I don't want to lead anyone. I want people to lead themselves. It's actually the leaders and the led over the centuries and into the modern world that's created a situation in which a very few people can actually control the direction of the world. It's about people, individuals, taking their power back and saying, look, I'm in control of my destiny. I'll listen to what this guy Icke says. I'll listen to this politician. I'll listen to this priest. I'll listen to James Whale. But I'm going to decide what they say that I'm going to accept. And I'm not going to take on anyone else's belief system, lock, stock, and barrel, like a clone. And what that means is letting go of fear. Because what we have at the moment is a mass schizophrenia, which works like this. Because we don't respect our own right to be unique and we fear expressing that uniqueness, we are a slave to what is imposed upon us, what is acceptable thought and behavior in the world, or what passes for it. Because we don't respect everyone else's right to express their uniqueness, like the last caller, by the way, we jump on them when they want to do that. And we say, oh, he's mad or he's bad. So at the same time, we are the slaves of this hassle-free zone and the prison warders of it.
Okay,
it's like having a cell full of prisoners, and whenever one of the prisoners finds a means of escape, all the other prisoners run to block the exit.
Right, I'm following the fact that you don't...
Okay, respecting ourselves and respecting everyone else.
David, I understand. I'm following the fact you don't want to be seen as a leader. I've got a fax...
I've made the point, great.
Right, a fax in front of me from Matt, who says, please ask David Icke, has he ever read anything by Rupert Sheldrake?
Yes, I've followed some of the stuff that Rupert Sheldrake says, and he talks about something called morphic resonance, which is what I talk about also, which is that the human mind, I think Jung called it the collective unconscious. The human mind, like all species, has a collective level where we're actually all part of each other. And via this process of individuals passing their thought and their knowledge to the collective level, it basically creates a bank of knowledge which other people can access, which is where this phenomenon called the 100th monkey syndrome, which some scientists have identified in the animal world, actually comes where they found that once a certain critical mass number of a species has been taught something new, suddenly, inexplicably, many or most of that species can suddenly do it without being shown. It's because they're linking into this morphic resonance, this collective mind, this collective unconscious.
Now, Sheldrake was thought of by some as a bit of a heretic, wasn't he?
Well, you see, James, if you look back through history, anyone who has challenged the status quo, including those, incidentally, who said the Earth was round when the status quo said it was flat, have had the treatment. They've been laughed at. They've been condemned as dangerous and all that stuff. And then they've been fated by history as people ahead of their time. It's gone on throughout history. And you see, if challenging the status quo is so wrong, then what that means is that we know it all. We've got all the answers. So you can't challenge anything because, the status quo, I mean, they know it all.
Okay, let's go to Michelle, who's called us from Hertfordshire. Michelle, you're on Talk Radio with David Icke.
Good evening, James.
Hi.
Good evening, David.
Hiya.
I'd just like to know, I mean, initially when you first went on telly and you made the statements that you did, if, with hindsight, perhaps you regret the manner that you did that in, I think... really what I'm trying to say is when I actually listened to what you were saying, some of it did actually make sense to me. And I think had you have put it over a little differently, it might have been a little easier. People might have taken it in a little easier.
Yeah, two things to that. First of all, the nature of the media, and I worked in it for a long time on the other side. If I'd have come out with this stuff, if you like, in a straightforward manner, it might have got 2 paragraphs in The Guardian at maximum, and that would have been it. I mean, there's many people over the years have been saying the same thing as me, and basically getting nowhere in terms of getting into the public arena. I didn't actually set out, I'm going to have a publicity stunt and all that stuff, but it just kind of worked out like that with hindsight. What I would say about the manner that in which it came over as well, in terms of myself, it did phenomenal amounts for me, because the nature of the experience that I went through in the public arena and all the ridicule and stuff, it really did let me let go of the mask, because I was a guy before that who was concerned with what other people thought of me. And that is a prison, and as a result of that, I stepped out of the prison, and so I wouldn't really change anything. Because, life's about experience. Life goes on forever, and it's all about having experiences and learning from them. Being afraid of having experiences and that are different from the norm is just a block in our evolution, really.
Okay, hang on just...
I wouldn't change a thing.
Hang on just a couple of seconds, David. And the truth shall set you free. I'm going to do one of those terrible things that people like me do, David.
You're not.
I am. It's just sort of kind of put everything to a nice little box. I mean, basically, the book is trying to... It continues the conspiracy theory to a level I think nobody realized you could continue the conspiracy theory to. And as talking to you, I seem to feel that what you want us to do is think.
Exactly.
You don't mind where we get to when we... as long as we all think.
Yeah, for ourselves.
For ourselves.
Exactly that.
Yeah. Because a lot of people are going to say, here comes a man who could be trying to set himself up as a new cult leader, a guru. You used the word yourself before, but you don't want that. You want people to open their own minds.
Absolute nightmare.
Fine.
You see, what I find around the world is dogmas that are... claiming to talk about freedom, but actually just want to impose a tyranny they like against a tyranny they do. All the time I meet people who talk about freedom, and yet what they want to put in its place is actually another form of telling people what to think. And I just feel that human beings have an infinite capacity to create, to think, to do all these things, but because of fear of expressing that, and if you like, evacuating this hassle-free zone of acceptable thought and behavior, which is a very narrow area, we actually deny ourselves on this planet vast amounts of human potential, which could transform this world from what it is to what it really could be. It's like having a Mercedes car and never getting out of first gear. And only by having the courage initially of thinking for ourselves and expressing what we really think rather than with what we think is acceptable to everyone else, do we free that potential and allow ourselves to be what we really can be and what we are really going to be. Because over the last 5 years, I get 2,000 to 3,000 letters a year and meet people around the country all the time. I mean, I'm in London a week on Friday at Euston Road talking about all this sort of stuff. Telegraph opposite Euston Station, and I meet people all the time. There is, from all backgrounds, I don't care whether it's people who work in the City of London or people who work in factories or whatever, whether their background, people are beginning to open up and ask questions that were not asked before, like, why is the world as it is? The world's as it is because the world as it is allows us to be controlled. And
okay, let's get a question from Mandy, who's calling us from Bolton. Hello, Mandy.
Good evening, James. Good evening, David.
Hi, Mandy.
Hi, I'm a great admirer of yours. Not particularly for the spiritual journey you've undertaken, but for the strength and courage that you've actually had to to go through it. The question I have, it's a bit long, but I'll go through it as fast as I can. In your earlier books, you say all thought and energy is of the one consciousness, and it is this ever-growing consciousness that you call the infinite mind. In other words, God. But if God was just mind, he would thrive on all consciousness, all thoughts, all actions, good and bad. But as life itself is balanced to experience good and bad, but to thrive on good rather than bad, on harmony rather than disharmony, peace rather than war, surely that suggests there must be some other element behind the creation of life.
Mandy, sorry to do you understand when David is talking and do you understand what David is getting at?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That I'll just do the last point again.
Go on.
Behind the creation of life, that is itself geared towards good, harmony and peace, and it is this element, the essence of good, harmony and peace, that is God. And therefore, to me, God would not just be the consciousness of the infinite mind. God is the energy, the essence, the spirit that influences the infinite mind towards the good. And I was just wondering if you had any sort of recent thoughts or views, on this.
I just feel that everything that exists is the same gigantic mind consciousness, which, as Socrates in ancient Greece is alleged to have said, wisdom is knowing how little we know. So there is so much more to know about all this and so much more to understand. But I just feel that everything that it's possible to think, everything is possible to feel, is represented within this gigantic mind. And we experience all kinds of things on the journey of evolution and understanding. For instance, you can only find balance in any situation if you've seen both sides of the balance point. You only understand what lukewarm is when you've experienced hot and cold. Then you understand what the balance point is. So I feel what we're doing all the time is experiencing all kinds of things which lead us on the journey of understanding. And we move on and we learn more and we understand more.
Okay.
Bill Hicks, the great American comedian who unfortunately died at the early age of 33 in 94, he had some wonderful things that he used to say. He used to describe this in little thumbnail sketches. One of the things he said was, all matter is merely energy condensed to a slow vibration. We're all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. There's no such thing as death. Life is just a dream. And we're the imagination of ourselves. I think that sums up my view of life, really.
Okay.
He described life as like a ride in an amusement park. You have your ups and downs, and
then you get off and go on to the next one.
Exactly, mate, yeah. Let
me take one more call, okay? Johnny is in Brighton. Let's go from Bolton down to Brighton. Johnny, you're on Talk Radio talking to David Icke.
Hello, David. It's Johnny. I wonder what you would have us believe. I read your book, Robots Rebellion. You said that Joseph was called Israel. Actually, it was Jacob. You said that Charles II was the brother of Charles I. Actually, obviously, he wasn't. I've never heard of two brothers both called Charles. And Thomas More, I should point out, was a layman and not part of the clergy. But if I asked you, David, what is your connection to a far right-wing bookseller called Don Martin of Bloomsbury Books, who supplies literature to the BNP and has a lot of Holocaust denial material saying that, Jews actually, not so many really did die during the Holocaust. Would you deny your links to the far right, David?
Sorry, do I answer that?
No, yes, I was hoping Johnny was going to get to an actual point, but he did at the end.
My point is
David from the far right, and do you what you're saying is you think that David has become
a mouthpiece for the far right? Actually.
Okay, let's have an answer from David Icke.
We have a robot radical in our midst. It's interesting. It's interesting, how all these kind of things get around. Virtually every article claiming that I'm some neo-Nazi in a magazine has come from two characters called Matthew Coleman and John Murray. And virtually every newspaper article that has appeared along these pathetic lines has actually been fed their information, by their own admission, by these same two people.
But I mean, to answer the point, though, David...
You then get loads of people believing this stuff. It's so
Sure.
easy. My relation to Don Martin, who you allege is this and you allege is that, is that I met him once, very briefly. Full stop, that's it.
And you have no leanings to the far right whatsoever.
Oh, for God's sake. I mean, my daughter, I'll tell you something, James, very quickly. My daughter goes round, and has gone round for years, with an anti-Nazi League badge. She is absolutely stunned. She goes on the anti-Nazi League marches when they're in London, where she lives. And here she is, seeing kind of organizations that she has supported and actually gone on marches with, dubbing her father a neo-Nazi. Her father, who for 21 years now, as she knows, has drummed into her that racism, judging people by their color, creed, or culture, not only is horrific, not only is silly, it's actually a sickness of the mind.
Okay.
But I'll tell you something, James, very quickly.
Go on, then.
Tyrannies take many forms, you know.
Yeah.
And people of the far right, what did they do in Nazi Germany? When the Nazis were trying to get their thugs into power in the 30s. They blocked meetings, they stopped people having platforms, and they broke up meetings of people who were challenging them and saying something different. What do the robot radicals of the far left do when people are saying something they don't agree with, or even not saying something they don't agree with, but something they've been persuaded they're saying that they don't agree with?
Okay.
They try to block meetings and deny people a platform to speak so people can make their own minds up.
That last
Tyrannies
caller,
take many forms,
David,
but
hang
I
on.
can't see much difference between
David.
the far right and the far left, I tell you that.
David, hang on. That last phone caller came from Brighton, where your meeting has just been banned.
Yeah.
I just want to go to one more, because Larry in London's called in, and I see on the screen in front of me, he's outraged over anti-Semitist remarks he thinks you made. Is that right, Larry?
Yes, that's right.
You've just heard what David has said. Does that help you?
To first of all deal with one thing David said, which gives you an indication of his standards of truth. He's denied a connection with Don Martin. You've just heard him say that.
Mm-hmm.
I've got Don Martin's publication On Target in front of me, and it publicises his books, and it says, we at On Target have been pleased...
Listen, have you read David Icke's new book?
I have read his book.
Okay.
And you've read it, James,
I've read the particular passage just this evening, again, about the master race, which said, Larry, which said to me, it said nothing really. I mean, I don't wish to be rude to David, but it said, you know, obviously things happened, but then things didn't happen, and we don't know, and it went on and left you wondering why.
Well, if I could remind you of the fact that he repeatedly endorses the protocols of the Elders of Zion, which are an anti-Jewish forgery, shown to be so in the last century. And the other point is, when he talked about the people who dominated the Versailles Peace Conference, his actual book referred to a Jewish and non-Jewish clique. Now, I cannot see there is any reason to refer to people's alleged racial origins other than that they are significant in the plot. If he'd have said a white male clique, there might have been a point. But the references to Jews, and if you look at his sources, he says he's worked on his own. Don Martin...
Let's get an answer from David, first of all, before you go on. David.
Let me see. Robots Rebellion, page 139. Let us get one thing very clear. The conspiracy I am exposing is not, repeat, not a conspiracy by the Jewish people. And few have suffered as much as the Jews in Germany and elsewhere from Brotherhood engineered events. I cannot make it any clearer, James. You've read the chapter. You've not come to that conclusion.
Larry.
Thousands of people have now read the book and not come to that conclusion.
My answer to that is not to say simplistically that David Icke is a Nazi, but that he puts some of those passages in to say he's not referring to Jewish people as a whole in order to sugar the pill of his anti-Semitism.
Listen. Let's ask this, Larry. See if this will help you. David, why did you feel a necessity when you knew the sort of wounds you would open writing this chapter, and you in fact saying it, people are going to really give me stick for this.
Yeah.
Why did you write it at all when maybe it is just actually going to be a very negative thing for you?
Because I believe in putting information into the public arena so that people can make their own minds up about it. I'll tell you what I'm most concerned about. It goes back to what I said earlier. I'm concerned that those who suffered appallingly in Nazi Germany, and my book actually is pointing out the Nazi mentality did not end in 1945. It actually continues to run this secret government that I'm exposing, ironically. I feel and I have a right to feel it, actually, that those who suffered appallingly in Nazi Germany, that suffering is being used by some of the people who didn't to stop legitimate investigation into their activities.
Why do you want this? Yeah, why do you want this investigation into these activities? Why do you think it is necessary?
Because we have a group of people of different backgrounds, different races, but with one mindset, that control the banking system, that control the political system, that control the global media, etc., etc. And together they are directing the world towards more and more centralization of power. Ironically, a fascist global state of one world government, one world central bank, one world army, one world currency.
And that's what you're trying to warn us against. Larry, surely that's a fair comment, isn't it?
But he is not adequately telling the truth of exactly what his theories are. The people who the highest-ranking human being in the world conspiracy is said to be Henry Kissinger, who is Jewish.
Oh, I am not saying that.
Hang on, Larry.
That is outrageous. That is outrageous. I am not saying that Henry Kissinger is the highest ranking. I call him in the book a super gopher. I also talk about money laundering.
Well,
They're not Jewish. Why are you calling me anti-American, Mr. whatever your name is?
Thank you. I think we'll probably leave it there, David, actually, because I think...
It's absolutely ridiculous, you know.
If
you can talk about people of any nation. You mention anyone who happens to be Jewish, and suddenly you're anti-Semitic. It's an insult to the intelligence. And would a person who's Jewish fund a book, for goodness sake, if that was the case?
Larry, hang on, Larry. Larry, is it fair to say, and maybe a point that David made there, if once somebody starts to actually, what was the word you used, David? Question somebody who is Jewish, then suddenly you get this anti-Semitism thing thrown in your face.
Well, I personally... if anything, I support the PLO. I am not Jewish myself. The Jewish Board of Deputies do not help my research. So I am not part of the Jewish establishment. I do not criticize people raising questions about Jewish people. Where I draw the line is when a conspiracy is described in which the leading personnel are Jewish. Henry Kissinger...
Nonsense! Again, you're talking lies, my friend.
But it's in his book.
Well, perhaps we could suffice to say... Perhaps we could suffice to say, maybe, Larry, you should read it again and then have another chat with him. David, thank you for talking to us about the new book.
James.
And Larry, thank you as well. And to all the other callers who wanted to get on, I now have to go and sit down very quietly in a room for just a couple of moments.